It was a cold winter evening, and the streets were nearly empty. The wind howled, biting through the layers of clothing people wore to shield themselves from the chill. A young woman, in her late 20s, walked briskly down the sidewalk, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets. She had just finished a long shift at the diner where she worked as a waitress. Her feet ached, and her mind was heavy with worries. Money was tight, and she had barely enough to cover her rent and groceries for the week. But despite her struggles, she carried herself with a quiet strength, her eyes reflecting a kindness that life hadn't been able to erase. As she turned the corner, she noticed a man sitting on the ground, leaning against the wall of a closed shop. His clothes were tattered, and his face was weathered, telling a story of hardship and survival. He held a small cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps. God bless." His eyes were downcast, and he seemed to be shivering in the cold. Passers-by ignored him, their faces turned away as they hurried along, eager to escape the biting wind. The woman paused for a moment, her heart aching at the sight. She didn't have much to give, in fact, she had just enough to buy herself a cheap meal on her way home. But something about the man's presence stirred something deep within her. She thought about how easily life could change, how anyone could find themselves in his position. Without overthinking, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her last dollar bill. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She walked over to the man and crouched down slightly, holding out the dollar. "Here," she said softly, her voice warm despite the cold. "I hope this helps a little." The man looked up, surprised. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a silent exchange of gratitude and understanding. He took the dollar with trembling hands and nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. God bless you." The woman smiled faintly and stood up, continuing on her way. She didn't think much of the encounter, it was just a small act of kindness, something she believed anyone would do if they could. But as she walked away, the man watched her for a moment, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions. He didn't know her name, and he doubted he'd ever see her again, but her gesture had touched him in a way he couldn't quite explain. Years passed, and life went on. The woman continued to work hard, juggling multiple jobs to make ends meet. She faced her share of challenges, times when she wondered if things would ever get easier, moments when she felt like giving up. But she always reminded herself to keep going, to hold on to the hope that things would eventually improve. She never forgot the man she had helped that cold evening, though she never expected to see him again. Meanwhile, the man's life took an unexpected turn. That dollar she had given him had been more than just money, it had been a spark of hope. That night, he had used it to buy a cup of coffee at a nearby shelter, where he struck up a conversation with a volunteer. The volunteer, moved by his story, helped him connect with a local program that provided support for people struggling with homelessness. Over time, he found stable work, saved money, and eventually got back on his feet. He never forgot the woman who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Her face and her words stayed with him, a reminder of the goodness that still existed in the world. One day, many years later, the woman was walking through a bustling part of the city. She had just finished running errands and was heading home. Her life had improved somewhat, she had a better job now, and though she still worked hard, she no longer had to worry about making ends meet. As she walked, she noticed a well-dressed man standing near a food cart, chatting with the vendor. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't quite place it. She brushed it off and continued walking. But then, the man turned and saw her. His eyes widened in recognition, and without hesitation, he called out to her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice filled with urgency. The woman stopped and turned, puzzled. The man quickly walked over to her, his face lit up with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "It's you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I've been looking for you for years." The woman frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" she asked politely. The man nodded eagerly. You might not remember me, but I remember you. Years ago, on a cold winter night, you gave me your last dollar. I was sitting on the street, and you stopped to help me. That moment changed my life." Her eyes widened as the memory came flooding back. She looked at him closely, seeing the man he had become, confident, well-dressed, and clearly doing well for himself. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "It's you." The man smiled, his eyes glistening with emotion. "Yes, it's me. I've always wanted to thank you properly. That dollar you gave me was more than just money, it was hope. It reminded me that there are still good people in this world, and it gave me the strength to keep going. Because of you, I was able to turn my life around." The woman felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had never expected anything in return for her small act of kindness, and yet here he was, standing in front of her, expressing his gratitude in a way that touched her deeply. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "I'm just so glad you're doing well." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "I've carried this with me for years, hoping I'd find you one day," he said, holding it out to her. "It's not much compared to what you did for me, but I want you to have it. Please, take it." The woman shook her head, her voice choked with emotion. "I can't accept that. You don't owe me anything." But the man insisted, pressing the bill into her hand. "It's not about owing," he said gently. "It's about gratitude. You showed me kindness when I needed it most, and I'll never forget that." The woman finally accepted the money, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. They stood there for a moment, two strangers brought together by a simple act of kindness that had rippled through both of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. As they parted ways, the woman couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope, not just for herself, but for the world. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures could have a profound impact, and that kindness, no matter how small, was never wasted. The encounter left the woman in a daze as she walked home, clutching the $100 bill in her hand. Her mind replayed the conversation over and over, the man's words echoing in her ears. She couldn't believe that such a small act of kindness from years ago had meant so much to someone. It made her reflect on her own life and the struggles she had faced. She had always tried to be kind, even when life was hard, but she had never imagined that her actions could have such a lasting impact. When she got home, she sat down at her small kitchen table, staring at the bill. It wasn't just the money, it was the story behind it, the reminder that goodness could come full circle. She thought about how often people felt powerless to make a difference in the world, thinking their small efforts didn't matter. But this experience had shown her otherwise. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about the little things, the moments of connection that could change someone's life. The next day, she decided to share the story with her co-workers at the diner. They were a close-knit group, always supporting each other through thick and thin. As she recounted the encounter, their faces lit up with amazement. "That's incredible," one of them said. "It's like something out of a movie." Another co-worker chimed in, "It just goes to show, you never know how much your kindness can mean to someone." The woman nodded, feeling a sense of validation. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action. It inspired her to be even more mindful of the way she treated others, to look for opportunities to help, no matter how small they seemed. She started carrying a little extra change in her pocket, just in case she came across someone in need. She also began volunteering at a local shelter on her days off, wanting to pay forward the hope she had given to the man all those years ago. Meanwhile, the man who had found her was also reflecting on their meeting. He had spent years wondering if he would ever see her again, and now that he had, he felt a deep sense of closure. But it also reignited something in him, a desire to give back, to help others the way she had helped him. He had come a long way since that cold winter night, but he hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be at rock bottom. He knew there were still so many people out there who needed a helping hand, and he was determined to do what he could. He started by donating to local shelters and food banks, but he wanted to do more. He decided to use his own story as a way to inspire others. He began speaking at community events, sharing his journey from homelessness to stability. He talked about the woman who had given him her last dollar and how that small act of kindness had been the turning point in his life. His story resonated with people, and soon, he was invited to speak at schools, churches, and even a few conferences. One day, as he was preparing for a speaking event, he received a message from the woman. She had found his contact information through a mutual acquaintance and wanted to reach out. "I just wanted to say thank you again," she wrote. "Your story has inspired me to do more, and I've started volunteering at a shelter. I hope we can stay in touch." The man smiled as he read her message, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He replied, thanking her for reaching out and inviting her to one of his upcoming events. A few weeks later, they met again, this time at a community center where the man was speaking. The woman sat in the audience, listening intently as he shared his story. She felt a swell of pride as she realized the impact her small act of kindness had had on his life. After the event, they spent some time catching up, sharing stories about their lives and the paths they had taken. They realized they had more in common than they had thought. Both had faced struggles, but both had also found strength in helping others. As they talked, the man mentioned an idea he had been considering. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation," he said. "Something to help people who are struggling, to give them the same kind of hope you gave me. But I'm not sure where to start." The woman's eyes lit up. "That's an amazing idea," she said. "I'd love to help in any way I can." They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, excited about the possibility of working together to make a difference. Over the next few months, they poured their energy into the foundation. They called it the ripple effect, inspired by the idea that small acts of kindness could create waves of change. They focused on providing immediate support, food, clothing, and shelter, but they also wanted to address the root causes of homelessness and poverty. They partnered with local organizations to offer job training, mental health services, and financial literacy programs. They also launched a mentorship program, pairing people who had overcome adversity with those who were still struggling. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting volunteers and donors from all walks of life. The woman and the man worked tirelessly, their shared passion driving them forward. They became close friends, their bond strengthened by their shared mission. They often reflected on how their paths had crossed all those years ago, marveling at the way life had brought them back together. One evening, as they were wrapping up a long day of planning, the woman turned to the man and said, "You know, I never could have imagined that giving you that dollar would lead to all of this." He smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. "And I never could have imagined that I'd get the chance to thank you in such a meaningful way. You changed my life, and now we're changing others' lives together." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action, not just in her own life but in the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. And as they continued their work, they knew that their story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and the incredible things that could happen when people came together to help one another. The foundation, the ripple effect, began to grow faster than either of them had anticipated. Word spread quickly about their mission, and soon they were receiving calls from people across the city who wanted to help. Donations poured in, and volunteers signed up in droves. The woman and the man were overwhelmed but deeply grateful. They knew this was their chance to make a real difference, and they were determined to make the most of it. One of their first major projects was organizing a community outreach event. They wanted to create a space where people in need could access resources, connect with support services, and feel a sense of hope. They spent weeks planning, reaching out to local businesses, shelters, and nonprofits to collaborate. The day of the event, the community center was buzzing with activity. Tables were set up with food, clothing, and hygiene kits. Representatives from various organizations were on hand to offer assistance with housing, job placement, and healthcare. The woman and the man moved through the crowd, greeting people and offering words of encouragement. They were struck by the diversity of the attendees: families with young children, elderly individuals, young adults struggling to find their footing. Each person had a story, and each story reminded them of why they had started the foundation in the first place. As they walked, they noticed a young woman sitting alone at one of the tables, her head bowed. She looked exhausted, her clothes worn and her face etched with worry. The woman approached her gently. "Hi there," she said, sitting down beside her. "I'm one of the organizers. Is there anything we can help you with today?" The young woman looked up, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know where to start," she said softly. "I lost my job a few months ago, and I've been staying with friends, but I can't keep relying on them. I don't know what to do." The woman listened intently, her heart aching for the young woman. She recognized the desperation in her voice. It was a feeling she knew all too well. "You're not alone," she said reassuringly. "We're here to help. Let's start by getting you connected with some resources." She introduced the young woman to a volunteer who specialized in job placement and housing assistance. As they walked away together, the woman felt a surge of hope. This was exactly why they had started the foundation, to be a lifeline for people who felt like they had nowhere else to turn. The event was a success, and in the weeks that followed, they began to see the impact of their efforts. People who had attended the outreach event were finding jobs, securing housing, and accessing the support they needed to rebuild their lives. The woman and the man were thrilled, but they knew there was still so much more to do. They began to expand their programs, offering workshops on financial literacy, mental health, and career development. They also started a mentorship program, pairing people who had overcome adversity with those who were still struggling. One of their most rewarding experiences came when they reconnected with the young woman they had met at the outreach event. She had found a job through the Foundation's job placement program and was now volunteering at their events. "I don't know where I'd be without you," she told them one day, her voice filled with gratitude. "You gave me hope when I had none, and now I want to do the same for others." Her words resonated deeply with the woman and the man. They realized that their work wasn't just about providing immediate assistance, it was about creating a cycle of hope and empowerment. They began to focus more on building a sense of community, encouraging people to support one another and share their stories. They started hosting regular gatherings where people could come together, share their experiences, and celebrate their progress. As the foundation grew, so did their friendship. The woman and the man spent countless hours working side by side, their shared passion for helping others bringing them closer together. They often reflected on how their paths had crossed all those years ago, marveling at the way life had brought them back together. They knew that their meeting had been more than just a coincidence, it had been a turning point, a moment that had set them on a path to make a difference in the world. One evening, as they were wrapping up a long day of planning, the man turned to the woman and said, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about that night when you gave me your last dollar. It wasn't just the money, it was the way you looked at me, like I was a person, not just someone to be ignored. That meant more to me than you'll ever know." The woman smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. "I'm so glad I could be there for you," she said. "But you've done so much more for me than I ever did for you. You've shown me that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a huge impact. And now, because of you, we're helping so many people." The man nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "We're a good team," he said. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The woman agreed, feeling a swell of pride. They had come so far, and they knew that their work was just beginning. They were determined to keep spreading hope, one small act of kindness at a time. As they continued their work, they began to see the ripple effect of their efforts in ways they had never imagined. People who had been helped by the foundation were now helping others, creating a network of support that extended far beyond their initial reach. They received letters and messages from people across the country, inspired by their story and motivated to make a difference in their own communities. One day, as they were reviewing the foundation's progress, the woman turned to the man and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met that night?" He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "All the time," he said. "But I'm so grateful that we did. You changed my life, and now we're changing others' lives together. I couldn't ask for anything more." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action, not just in her own life but in the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. And as they continued their work, they knew that their story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and the incredible things that could happen when people came together to help one another. As the foundation continued to grow, the woman and the man found themselves busier than ever. Their days were filled with meetings, events, and planning sessions, but they wouldn't have had it any other way. They were driven by a shared purpose, and every success story fueled their determination to do more. One of their most ambitious projects was the creation of a transitional housing program. They wanted to provide a safe, stable environment for people who were working to rebuild their lives, offering not just shelter but also access to resources and support. The program took months of planning and collaboration with local organizations, but eventually, they secured a building that could house up to 20 families. They named it Hope House, a fitting tribute to the foundation's mission. The day they opened its doors was one of the proudest moments of their lives. Families moved in, their faces filled with gratitude and relief. For many, it was the first time in years they had a place to call home. The woman and the man spent time getting to know the residents, listening to their stories and offering encouragement. One resident, a single mother with 2 young children, shared how she had been living in her car before finding Hope House. "I didn't know how I was going to keep my kids safe," she said, her voice trembling. "But now, because of you, we have a chance to start over." Her words stayed with them, a reminder of why they were doing this work. As the months passed, Hope House became a thriving community. Residents supported one another, sharing meals, childcare, and advice. The foundation offered workshops on parenting, budgeting, and job skills, helping people build the tools they needed to succeed. The woman and the man often visited, spending time with the residents and celebrating their progress. It was hard work, but it was also deeply rewarding. One evening, as they were leaving Hope House after a long day, the man turned to the woman and said, "Do you ever think about how far we've come? From that cold night on the street to this, it's almost hard to believe." The woman smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "I think about it all the time," she said. "But it's not just us. It's everyone who's been part of this journey, the volunteers, the donors, the residents. We're all in this together." Their work at the foundation had also brought them closer to their community in ways they hadn't expected. They were invited to speak at schools, churches, and local events, sharing their story and inspiring others to take action. People were moved by their message, and many were motivated to get involved. The foundation's volunteer base grew, and they began to see the ripple effect of their efforts spreading even further. One day, they received a call from a local news station. A reporter had heard about their work and wanted to feature them in a segment on community heroes. At first, they were hesitant. They had never sought attention for themselves, and the focus had always been on the people they were helping. But after some discussion, they decided it was an opportunity to raise awareness about the foundation and its mission. The day of the interview, they were nervous but excited. The reporter asked them about their journey, from that fateful night on the street to the creation of the foundation. They spoke openly about their struggles and triumphs, emphasizing the importance of kindness and community. "It's not about us," the woman said. "It's about the people we serve and the incredible impact we can have when we come together to help one another." The segment aired a few days later, and the response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, and their inbox was flooded with messages from people who had been inspired by their story. Some shared their own experiences of hardship and resilience, while others expressed a desire to get involved. The woman and the man were humbled by the outpouring of support, but they also felt a renewed sense of responsibility. They knew they had to keep pushing forward, to honor the trust people had placed in them. With the increased funding and visibility, they were able to expand their programs even further. They launched a mobile outreach unit, bringing food, clothing, and resources to people in underserved areas. They also started a scholarship fund, helping young people from low-income families pursue higher education. Every new initiative was met with enthusiasm, and they were constantly amazed by the generosity of their community. But as the foundation grew, so did the challenges. There were days when the weight of it all felt overwhelming, when the problems they were trying to solve seemed too big to tackle. On those days, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared vision and the stories of the people they had helped. They reminded themselves that change didn't happen overnight, but every small step mattered. One particularly difficult day, they received news that one of the residents at Hope House had relapsed and was struggling with addiction. It was a heartbreaking setback, but they were determined to support her. They connected her with a counselor and surrounded her with love and encouragement. It was a reminder that their work wasn't just about providing resources, it was about being there for people, no matter how hard things got. As they continued their work, they began to see the ripple effect of their efforts in ways they had never imagined. People who had been helped by the foundation were now helping others, creating a network of support that extended far beyond their initial reach. They received letters and messages from people across the country, inspired by their story and motivated to make a difference in their own communities. One day, as they were reviewing the foundation's progress, the woman turned to the man and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met that night?" He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "All the time," he said. "But I'm so grateful that we did. You changed my life, and now we're changing others' lives together. I couldn't ask for anything more." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action, not just in her own life but in the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. And as they continued their work, they knew that their story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and the incredible things that could happen when people came together to help one another. The foundation's success brought with it new opportunities and challenges. The woman and the man found themselves traveling to other cities, sharing their story and inspiring others to start similar initiatives. They were invited to speak at conferences, where they met people from all walks of life who were passionate about making a difference. Each encounter left them feeling energized and hopeful, but it also reminded them of how much work still needed to be done. One of their most memorable trips was to a small town in the Midwest. They had been invited by a local church group that wanted to start a community outreach program. The town had been hit hard by economic downturns, and many families were struggling to make ends meet. As they drove through the quiet streets, they noticed the boarded-up storefronts and the tired faces of the people they passed. It was a stark reminder that poverty and hardship existed everywhere, not just in big cities. The woman and the man spent the weekend working with the church group, sharing their experiences and offering guidance. They helped organize a small outreach event, where they distributed food and clothing to families in need. The response was overwhelming. People lined up for hours, their gratitude evident in their smiles and words of thanks. The woman and the man were struck by the resilience of the community, their determination to support one another despite the challenges they faced. On their last day in town, they visited a local school, where they spoke to a group of students about the importance of kindness and community. The students listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity. After the talk, a young girl approached the woman, clutching a handmade card. "Thank you for coming," she said shyly. "I want to help people too, just like you." The woman felt a lump in her throat as she took the card, her heart swelling with emotion. It was moments like these that reminded her why they did what they did. Back home, they continued to focus on expanding their programs. One of their most ambitious projects was the creation of a job training center, where people could learn new skills and gain certifications in various fields. They partnered with local businesses to ensure that the training programs aligned with the needs of the job market. The center quickly became a hub of activity, with people of all ages coming to learn and grow. One of the center's first success stories was a man in his 50s who had been unemployed for years. He had lost his job during a company downsizing and had struggled to find work ever since. At the job training center, he enrolled in a program for IT support and quickly excelled. Within months, he had earned his certification and secured a job at a local tech company. "I never thought I'd have a second chance," he told the woman and the man, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me." Stories like his fueled their determination to keep pushing forward. They knew that every person they helped was a step toward building a stronger, more compassionate community. But as the foundation grew, so did the demands on their time and energy. There were days when they felt overwhelmed, when the weight of it all seemed too much to bear. On those days, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared vision and the stories of the people they had helped. One evening, after a particularly long day, the woman and the man sat in the foundation's office, surrounded by paperwork and plans. They were both exhausted, but they knew they couldn't stop. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if we hadn't started this?" the man asked, his voice quiet. The woman nodded, her eyes tired but determined. "All the time," she said. "But then I think about all the people we've helped, all the lives we've touched. I wouldn't trade that for anything." The man smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Me neither," he said. "We've come so far, but there's still so much to do." The woman agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that their work was far from over, but they also knew that they were making a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. As they continued their work, they began to see the ripple effect of their efforts in ways they had never imagined. People who had been helped by the foundation were now helping others, creating a network of support that extended far beyond their initial reach. They received letters and messages from people across the country, inspired by their story and motivated to make a difference in their own communities. One day, as they were reviewing the foundation's progress, the woman turned to the man and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met that night?" He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "All the time," he said. "But I'm so grateful that we did. You changed my life, and now we're changing others' lives together. I couldn't ask for anything more." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action, not just in her own life but in the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. And as they continued their work, they knew that their story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and the incredible things that could happen when people came together to help one another. The foundation's impact continued to grow, touching lives in ways the woman and the man had never imagined. Their work had become a beacon of hope, not just in their city but across the country. They were invited to speak at national conferences, where they shared their story and inspired others to take action. Each event left them feeling energized, but it also reminded them of the immense challenges that still existed. Poverty, homelessness, and inequality were deeply rooted issues, and they knew their work was just a small part of the solution. One day, they received an unexpected call from a well-known philanthropist who had heard about their foundation. He was deeply moved by their story and wanted to meet them. A few weeks later, they found themselves sitting in his office, surrounded by awards and accolades. The philanthropist listened intently as they shared their journey, his eyes filled with admiration. "What you've done is remarkable," he said. "I'd like to help you take it to the next level." The woman and the man were stunned. They had never expected such an offer, but they knew it was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. With the philanthropist's support, they were able to expand their programs even further. They launched a nationwide campaign to raise awareness about homelessness and poverty, partnering with celebrities and influencers to spread their message. The campaign went viral, and soon, people from all over the country were reaching out to get involved. The foundation's job training center became a model for similar programs in other cities. They developed a curriculum that could be easily replicated, and they offered training and support to organizations that wanted to start their own centers. The woman and the man traveled extensively, helping others set up programs and sharing their expertise. It was exhausting work, but it was also incredibly rewarding. One of their most memorable trips was to a rural community in the South. The town had been devastated by the closure of its main industry, and many families were struggling to make ends meet. The woman and the man worked with local leaders to set up a job training center, focusing on skills that were in demand in the region. They also helped organize a community garden, providing fresh produce to families in need. The project brought the community together, and the woman and the man were struck by the resilience and determination of the people they met. As they continued their work, they began to see the ripple effect of their efforts in ways they had never imagined. People who had been helped by the foundation were now helping others, creating a network of support that extended far beyond their initial reach. They received letters and messages from people across the country, inspired by their story and motivated to make a difference in their own communities. One day, as they were reviewing the foundation's progress, the woman turned to the man and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met that night?" He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "All the time," he said. "But I'm so grateful that we did. You changed my life, and now we're changing others' lives together. I couldn't ask for anything more." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action, not just in her own life but in the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. And as they continued their work, they knew that their story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and the incredible things that could happen when people came together to help one another. But as the foundation grew, so did the demands on their time and energy. There were days when they felt overwhelmed, when the weight of it all seemed too much to bear. On those days, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared vision and the stories of the people they had helped. One evening, after a particularly long day, the woman and the man sat in the foundation's office, surrounded by paperwork and plans. They were both exhausted, but they knew they couldn't stop. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if we hadn't started this?" the man asked, his voice quiet. The woman nodded, her eyes tired but determined. "All the time," she said. "But then I think about all the people we've helped, all the lives we've touched. I wouldn't trade that for anything." The man smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Me neither," he said. "We've come so far, but there's still so much to do." The woman agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that their work was far from over, but they also knew that they were making a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. As they continued their work, they began to see the ripple effect of their efforts in ways they had never imagined. People who had been helped by the foundation were now helping others, creating a network of support that extended far beyond their initial reach. They received letters and messages from people across the country, inspired by their story and motivated to make a difference in their own communities. One day, as they were reviewing the foundation's progress, the woman turned to the man and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met that night?" He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "All the time," he said. "But I'm so grateful that we did. You changed my life, and now we're changing others' lives together. I couldn't ask for anything more." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she had seen it in action, not just in her own life but in the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. And as they continued their work, they knew that their story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and the incredible things that could happen when people came together to help one another.